Leah, why do you look so upset?
I was just reminded about something from my childhood.
A past trauma? Tell me about this past trauma, Leah.
Yes, it was a very traumatic trauma. I just remembered that when my mom would take us to Chipotle,
Yes?
she would
Yes?
call it Chipotle.
Leah! Leah! Yo soy Lamont.
Olea ko'uinoa.
And
you're tuning into
the
Lamont and Leah podcast. Lamont, I'm nervous. You're going to have to do the intro.
So today on the Lamont and Leah podcast, Leah has been working very hard to get a special guest named Max Miller. He has his own podcast. He is big in the food industry. Is that right, Leah?
The YouTube food, like the food side of YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah, he has a show called Tasting History.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to get to meet him. I haven't talked to him myself. I've only corresponded with him just a little bit. So it's gonna be a good day. I'm really excited about this topic. It's actually something that I may not talk about a lot, but means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad we get to talk about it today. And are you excited, Leah?
I'm nervous. But yes, I'm excited.
It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
All right,
let's go get him.
All right.
Max, welcome to the Lamont and Leah podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we are so excited for you agreeing to be here. Leah loves your YouTube.
Thank you.
Tasting History.
Yes.
I have to admit, I haven't checked it out, but I will definitely go check it out after today, for sure.
Definitely.
You also have a podcast, Catching Up with Max and Jose?
Yeah, so it's a podcast sometimes, and sometimes it's also YouTube videos. It's kind of whatever Jose is my fiance, and he it's basically just talking about the channel or kind of whatever we want to talk about. And depending on how much work he wants to do on any given week, it's either a podcast or an actual video. It just takes longer to edit the video. So
yeah, I know.
Leah would under.
Yeah.
I understand.
So could you take a few more minutes to tell us more about yourself and introduce yourself, or viewer and listener audience?
Yeah, so I run a YouTube channel called Tasting History with Max Miller. I'm Max Miller. And basically every week I find a recipe from history, or sometimes it's finding a dish that doesn't have a recipe and kind of trying to manufacture that recipe. But basically I recreate historic dishes, and then I talk about the history of the food or an ingredient or the culture that was eating it. Whatever I want to talk about, basically.
That sounds exciting. I can't wait to go check it out.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's very light. It's not there's some levity, and it's not too serious. So it's I think people enjoy that aspect.
Yes, we do. All right. Lamont, do you have any other questions, or should we just get started?
No, let's go ahead and dive into our main topic.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So you already introduced your show, which is great, because I had this whole long thing that I was going to do to introduce it, and we could skip all that.
Awesome.
Okay. So what drew me into your show, besides the food and the history and the story behind it, because that's fascinating to me, was the amount of effort you put into learning how to say words from other languages.
Hmm.
Because you deal with like different cultures and different recipes from different periods in time, and they speak a lot of different languages other than, English.
Right.
And as a Hawaiian person who lives in Hawaii, I see people like every single day mispronounce words out here, and it like really gets under my skin. And also being from California, there's a lot of like Hispanic and Spanish words like everywhere, street names, store
Hmm.
names, people.
Right.
And I would always hear people mispronounce them. And, I'd always be like, it's pronounced this way. And they'd be like, well, that's the English way of saying it. That's the American way of saying it, which I always found like a very amusing excuse for
I find it
things.
cringy.
Me too. Me too. But I'm just like, that's a very fun way of saying that, you don't care.
You don't care. Yeah.
Yeah. So why did you feel that it was important to put work into learning how to pronounce words correctly on your show?
Um, it's first of all, I love language. All languages pretty much. I think it's fascinating how languages change, how they have so much influence on culture, how they can be used to lift people out of, language can lift people. If you watch My
Mm-hmm.
Fair Lady, it lifts her out of the gutter, her learning
Yeah.
how to speak properly. And it can also be used as a way to oppress people, and has been also English. I mean,
Yeah.
by stopping the Welsh and stopping the Irish from using their languages. And, of course, all over the world it happens. So I love language. I love the history of language. And I love learning how to pronounce things, partly as I just like learning in general, but it's almost like a bit of a challenge. It's like, oh, let me see if I can learn how to pronounce this. But I think that when it comes to tasting history specifically, I think it's very important from a respect for the culture that I'm talking about, whether that is French or Italian or Chinese or, South American or wherever it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain amount of respect that goes into it, and I've noticed that people appreciate that. I mean, well, that's why I'm doing the podcast. But it is very hard, especially because a lot of the words that I use are old
Mm.
and don't exist anymore, even in those languages today,
Yeah.
or they were pronounced differently. Just as English was pronounced differently 500 years ago, so was Mandarin, so was German. And so a lot of people sometimes, they don't get that, even if they speak the language today. It's like, no, 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 it's changed, it's evolved. So I've been super fortunate to have people like, I have a wonderful source who knows classical Mandarin, and he's able to teach me the pronunciation, or he tries to teach me the
Yeah.
pronunciation of that. So I've been very fortunate to have people help me.
Mm-hmm. And I know your channel's like just over like year and a half,
About a year and a half now.
year and a
Yeah.
half. Has this been something you've done like since the beginning, or did it like evolve over time?
I've tried since the beginning. I, like I said, I've always enjoyed language. I studied French, German, Italian, and Latin in school because I went to school
Nice.
for singing, for music. And so you kind of have to learn those languages, and more than actually learn what you're saying is how to pronounce the things, so that you can go sing in Germany and
Yeah.
they'll think you know German even if you don't. Um, and so I tried to do that on the show from the very start. And one thing that really made me focus on it was when I made a mistake.
Hmm.
And it was, I can't remember now what the word was, but it was a Mandarin word. And, you don't know what you don't know. And so when I look at a word and it's spelled a certain way, and I know that that's how it's pronounced, and then I say it that way, and then it turns out that is incorrect. It is not, even though it is spelled, I can't remember now what the word was. I wish I could, but it sounds completely different than how it's spelled, which I don't quite get why, whoever did the transliteration into Western alphabet would have not done it phonetically. I don't get it. It's almost like laying traps. But it made me realize, oh, I thought that I knew this, and clearly I don't. And so I'm going to reach out to someone who does and learn, because I like learning, and I hate being wrong. It happens all the time, but I don't like it. So my goal is always, don't make the same mistake twice,
That's really cool. That's really honorable. It sounds like you have a passion for learning and overall just respect for different cultures.
Yeah, I try. Sometimes it's hard because, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. And so you can make mistakes without knowing that you're making mistakes, without any intention of of being wrong. But people are not shy about letting you know when you make
Right.
those mistakes.
Especially online.
And I do think, yeah, especially online. But I do think that most people are very understanding if they can see that you're making an effort. And I think that making an effort is just important. That, it's almost like it's the thought that counts. It's the effort that counts. Even if you're wrong, you have attempted to be respectful. You have attempted to be right, and that's all you can ask for people usually.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on the excuse, like, that's the American way of saying it, or that's the English way of saying it?
Sometimes I think it goes. It depends on the word, um, on the situation. There are some words, like the word tamale. I pronounce it tamale, even though that's not, because it would sound weird if I put a heavy accent on the word in everyday speech, because that word has been taken into the English language. That's one of the things. That's one of the reasons why I think that English is such an amazing language. Is it just steals from everything, and that's
does.
why.
It
And
does.
so, and because of that, it is the most robust language that there is. We have 50 words for everything, and so it makes translating things into poetry and everything wonderfully, because you can make things rhyme that even when it's translated into English, and a lot of other languages don't have that opportunity. That said, so with a word like tamale, it has been anglicized so so much that I think that that's okay. But so many other words that are not now part of the English lexicon, just because no, you should learn how to pronounce that in its original language. I find that there's a huge difference between Americans and the English. The English are almost, and this is a blanket statement, obviously, but the English are obstinate about the pronunciation of foreign words. They will go out of their way to not pronounce it the way that it was, especially if it's French or Italian.
And then
it's
ask you to agree with them.
And that, yes, I mean, like, they won't say pasta. They will not say pasta. It's pasta. They know it's wrong. They know it's wrong, but they won't, because there is this kind of, and I don't know where it comes from, but I'm sure it's been happening for a very long time. There is that, we're going to make this English if it kills us. So I do think that it's, kind of on a it's there's no one rule. And And again, it's when somebody says, oh, well, that's the English way of pronouncing it. Is it because that word is used in everyday English all the time? Or is it that you simply don't want to take the time to learn how to pronounce it? So the intent is very important there, I think. And usually it's the latter,
Agree.
usually it's the
Agree.
latter, especially with words that um, where a letter doesn't sound like we would say it. I'm trying to think of some Spanish words because I grew up in Phoenix, so many of our street names are Spanish, and or many of them are actually Native American names, words that have been, again, transliterated into English, and sometimes very poorly, but that's still how we do it. Is it Yomax? Yomax, where it's like Jomax, I believe, is how it's spelled. So everybody says Jomax because there's no reason that they would think why, it doesn't make sense no matter what. But it's once you learn, oh no, this is not, an English word that we just made up or whatever, then it's like, no, then you need to pronounce it correctly. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I've had friends that gave me that excuse of like Hawaiian words, even just the word Hawaii,
Right.
Hawaii. And like I would call them out on it, and they're just like, well, should we pronounce all words that come from other countries that way? And I'm like, yeah. Just
Or at
do
least
it.
try,
Or at least try. Or like
Or and yeah, and I mean, I especially so especially with Hawaiian words, I feel, because so as I was saying, how language can be used to oppress people, the Hawaiian language and English was used to oppress the Hawaiian people. So that's not always the case, but especially with Hawaiian, it's and as you say, I mean, I don't know how to pronounce a lot of the language, but gosh, I want to learn. And whenever I can learn, I do, and then I remember. So it is. Yeah, there is though also that bit of when you've been taught and only heard it pronounced Hawaii for your entire life, making that change is hard to, it's, you almost feel like you might be even more offensive by screwing it up, pronouncing it Hawaii, So I kind of understand that to a degree, and how hard it is, because you really have to retrain yourself, and that doesn't happen overnight. But again, you still got to make the effort.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's making the effort that is. So I think there's, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you bring up some good points. I think it is effort that matters, right? Because I'm thinking, even as a native Californian who speaks English, there are certain English words I struggle saying just because I struggle saying them. And I know that's not right. I know that's not how it's pronounced. Like I'm going to try this word. Let's see if I can get it. Feminine. Like, I don't think I even said it right there. Like, I have a hard time pronouncing that word. Leah, how do you say that word?
Feminine.
Yes, that's how you say that word. I have a hard time saying that word. Like,
I can barely say the phrase muscular dystrophy.
Muscular dystrophy.
Muscular. It's very hard for me to say that. So I get that, and that's the thing. That's another thing that I have found. So I like language. I think growing up singing trained my ear to pick sounds up and then be able to say them the way that I heard them. Not everyone has that.
That's true.
Right. Not everyone. They'll it's what was it from the Pee-wee's Big Adventure, when they're in Texas and she's speaking Buenos dias, senors and senoritas. I know people who speak Spanish that way, and they literally cannot hear. They think that they're saying it right. So there's also, and then there are just some sounds that we don't make in English. And it's the same with every language. Japanese people have trouble with the letter L. It's because that is not anything that their mouth ever had to learn as a kid. And so being able to do that later on in life, it's very, very hard. English doesn't have umlauts over U's and O's. And
those are so hard.
They're so hard. So again, it's like, there's the effort, and you can tell. And I think it's easy usually to tell if someone is making an effort or if they are being obstinately wrong. And people do that. And again, here I think is a way, I don't want to say it's a way that language can be used to oppress people here, but it can be a way for a person, it's almost egotistical in a way. It's like, no, I'm going to do this because I'm going to say it my way because my way is the right way, even if it's the wrong way. So yeah, it's all about intent.
Right.
Agree.
So I kind of want to share a story. I have this friend, and I met him about like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. And I had been saying his name wrong from day one, but I had no idea that I had been saying his name wrong. And I think a few weeks ago, we were hanging out, and I was like, blah, 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 and I said his name. He's like, hey, Lamont, I'm going to take you the opportunity to say my name right. And I was like, what do you mean say your name right? Have I not been saying it right this whole entire time? And I'm like, why didn't you correct me when I first said it wrong? I've been calling you this like for almost 2 years. Like now I have to retrain my brain to like not call you what I was calling you and call you properly. And so I think, and like, I think to him, like it just usually doesn't matter, but today, that day just really probably just got under your skin like, oh my God.
Yeah. No. And it's, what is that phrase with the law? Ignorance of the law is no excuse not to follow the law, or something like that. Like if you don't know the law, you can still break it and you're still held accountable. I don't think that applies with language.
Right.
You thought you were saying his name correctly. So it is up to him to correct you, which he did. Took a couple years, but you couldn't be expected to, if you think you're doing it right, but once you are corrected, then it's important to really make an effort to say it correctly.
And I think I actually have it nailed. It took like a few weeks, but like I'm just like, gosh, and I was angry. I was really angry because I was annoyed because I was like, why wouldn't you just tell me?
Right. Well, and then there's I have some friends who have foreign names, and they will pronounce it 2 different ways. When they introduce themselves to another Korean speaker, it is done in that accent. But when they introduce themselves to me, they say it in an anglicized form, So I shouldn't be expected to, if that's how they introduce themselves, that's how I should say it. I shouldn't say, well, no, I'm going to pronounce it the way that your mother would pronounce it, who is a native Korean speaker. Because frankly, I'm probably going to butcher it even more by doing that. So I think that, some people want that kind of, it's a way almost to, was it the phrase code switching, code flipping? It's kind of like that. And I think that that's okay, especially when it comes to people's names. You pronounce it the way that they have introduced themselves to you.
Yeah. I have a friend who does that.
Yeah, no, because sometimes it's like, well, either it's more trouble than it's worth, or it would sound weird to them to have you say it in the original accent. and expecting everybody to be able to reproduce that accent is darn near impossible sometimes, depending on the name. So
So sometimes, okay, so I'm kind of guilty of this because like I kind of want to call people like as close as I can get it or what's originally sounding, but they go along with like, oh, like so many people like I feel like they have this attitude of like so many people abuse it, let's just do it their way. I'm like no,
right,
like let's say it the right way. And so one name I do that with is Jorge, right? Like early on, I learned that George is Jorge in Spanish. And
right,
so if a person introduces himself as George, I'm like, do you prefer George or would you really prefer Jorge?
right.
And they're like, huh. Some people are like, no, call me George. Like,
No,
no,
yeah,
call
okay.
me Jorge. Like,
Right,
other people are like, no, actually, I would prefer Jorge, but most people like struggle saying that, so I
right,
don't.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that totally makes it. Well, so my fiance's name is Jose, and I call him Jose. When he introduced himself, it was Jose. But when he's around his family, it's Jose or Jose. I see. I have trouble
Mhm.
recreating the exact sound, and so that's a case where, yeah, he probably would prefer that, but he knows that most people are not going to. Most English speakers are not going
Mhm.
to be able to do that. So he goes with Jose, and that's what I call him.
Okay.
Lamont, you know whose name is like that?
Who's?
Tyra's.
Oh, Tiratel?
Tiratel is how she says it in English, but it's Romanian. And
Uh,
so I love to butcher it just because it's a joke between us. So I just run around the house and I go Tiratel, and I don't know how close that is actually in Romanian, but it's
it's
fun.
it's hard. I mean, and so with Lamont, with Jorge, it's there are these different levels of wanting to pronounce something correctly. So you knew, okay, well, George was not what you were born with, so it's probably Jorge. So I call you Jorge. But at what point then is it actually Jorge?
Right.
Because then
Yeah.
they have their own way of,
Yeah.
that's the native um, tongue. Has that different pronunciation. But so it's kind of like, how many steps do you go? And I think it's, again, situational, um, and you just try not to be purposefully offensive to anyone.
Exactly.
Right. So I'm also thinking of another time. So I have this best friend who became my brother, and I adopted his family, and they adopted me back. And but before we became family, his name is Jamie. Like everyone calls him Jamie. The parents call him Jamie. Everyone calls him Jamie. But the thing is, we had girl Jamie and boy Jamie, and the both of them got tired of girl Jamie and boy Jamie. They just got like tired of it. So like when I looked at Jamie's name, I was like, dude, your name's Jaime. And he was like, well, everyone just calls me Jamie. I was like, but literally, it spells out Jaime.
Yeah.
And he was like, I was like, I'm gonna start calling you Jaime. Like, if you're tired of the boy Jamie, like, Jaime will work.
Go
And
with
he was like,
Jaime.
okay, whatever. And so, like, a lot of people started calling him Jaime because I called him Jaime, and I even got my mom and dad to call him. They call him Jaime sometimes, like when I'm around.
Right.
Um, and
That's so
stuff.
funny.
And recently, I started reverting back to Jamie just because, like, we haven't spent that much time together, and a lot of people like they get comfortable in the Jamie with the Jamie. So I'm like,
Right.
oh. And now that we don't have to like compete with girl Jamie and boy Jamie, it's like, why not? Like,
Go
that's
back
what-
to
yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
even know his name was Jamie. You
Oh,
you
'cause I always
you
called him
introduced
Jaime.
me as Jaime. I was like, oh, whoops.
That's so funny.
Okay, so here's a question: what is the hardest or most challenging language that you've had to say something in for your show?
Mandarin.
Mandarin.
It's it is so hard. I partly because of how it's spelled. There are because it's a different alphabet. It's the Chinese. It's written in Chinese, so it has to be transliterated
Opinion.
into our letters. But it's done differently
Mhm.
because there is no one way to do it. Sometimes an X is used for the sh sound, and sometimes an sh is, and sometimes a ch is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's hard. But then what's really hard is that it is a pitched language, meaning
Yes.
depending on how your voice does certain things, it can change the word. And all of them are exactly not what you would think they are. And no matter how well you do them, you're incorrect. I have native speakers of the language say it's hard for us sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and because it's a very regional. They're very regional dialects, even more so than English, where it is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot understand the person speaking to you 50 miles away from here. That it's very hard. But again, so that's a language where when it's written, especially when it's written in our alphabet, you think you are absolutely sure that you know how to pronounce something, and you don't. But there's no reason that you would know unless somebody said, no, the SHI does not spell sheep. It spells shirt, well,
Yeah.
why would you know that? There's no reason for you to know that unless you've taken Mandarin. So, because I do this every week, there are just so many languages. Arabic is very difficult, and Chinese and Japanese is hard because it's so different from our ear. It just, even picking up the sounds, you can't even sometimes hear the difference. And so I just always assume I don't know now, but I can't expect most people to assume that they don't know. I just always assume I don't know how to pronounce any of these words, so I'm going to go find a native speaker.
Yeah.
And I put a call out on Twitter, and 50 people write me, and they're like, "We'll record it for you."
Yeah.
But yeah, so long story. Mandarin is the hardest one that I've done.
Yeah, when I went to China, I tried really hard to learn how to say just the basic, like thank you, please, the name of our hotel, stuff
Hmm.
like that, because I was like, we already stick out.
Yeah.
We already stick out. Let me
Oh
at
yeah.
least learn how to say thank you correctly.
Yeah. It's funny because even in English, we have this same problem. Um, if you go to a certain place in England, you might think Alnwick. How do you say that? Alnwick? Yeah. Nope, that's wrong. It's Alnwick. So there's no reason that you would know that unless you were from Northern England,
Yeah.
And then when those names come to America and they're put in American towns, they're pronounced differently
Mm-hmm.
because, so it's 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 so hard to know if you are right or wrong. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times people have only seen things written and they've never heard them said.
True.
And that's why when people pronounce words in English, especially a native English speaker pronounces an English word wrong, uh, you know, uh, you should never mock them. You should never make fun of them. You can correct them, but all it means is that they know that word because they've read that word, and that's a good thing. Reading is a good thing. So, if you've never heard it said out loud, you might not know how to say it.
True. True.
Yeah, all those languages, especially Mandarin, sound very difficult. How
Very difficult.
much do you need to practice before feeling comfortable saying it on camera?
Depends on the language. For some languages, like anything that's in Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, or Swedish. I did Swedish not that long ago. I will have someone record it for me, and I will literally listen to it and then parrot it right back to the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, because my memory is not good. So I'll forget how to pronounce something very quickly. So it does take some practice. because I like to, say it to them and be like, am I reproducing this sound at least somewhat
Mm-hmm.
accurately? Um, and so it just depends. Sometimes it's first try, and then sometimes it's Mandarin, and it took days for me to get it. And even then, I never got it, and I never will. If you're not born there, you're not going to pronounce it exactly right. You're just not.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've used that technique before, haven't I, Leah? With the guest name, actually. Like,
Yeah.
they were a guest, and I was like, oh, man, like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to say their name, so they recorded it, and
That's
I played it, and
multiple
I said
guests,
it.
Lamont. Multiple. Someone's last name. That was really funny.
Yeah. I actually say his last name now.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
But most recent one, like, I had to play it a couple of times, and then I said it.
Yeah.
Right. That's funny.
So I think you touched on this earlier, but has anyone like seriously complained about your pronunciation? And like, even though you did your best.
So I get it. Yes, sometimes I do, and sometimes I make mistakes. When I'm talking really quickly, I'll say something wrong. Even in my own language,
Yeah.
I'll pronounce something because you do that. And
Yeah.
I think that people think that they say everything that they are meaning to say. But if you record yourself talking for an hour, you'll find out that you say a lot of things wrong that you say every day. And
Yep.
we'll swap words, but it's done so quickly that, nobody notices. It happens sometimes. Usually people are nice about it. I think a lot of it depends on my mood in reading the comments, because you can sometimes read the exact same comment in a nice way and the exact same thing. If I'm in a bad mood, it's like, oh, they came for me. They're in it's the exact same comment, but it's how I interpret it because it's written down, so you don't get their inflections or whatever.
Exactly.
What's odd and what annoys me is more often I get criticism for pronouncing words correctly. I get criticism from, they're usually Americans or English, and they're saying you're trying too hard. You're,
Wow.
why don't you just say it in your accent and everything like that? And it's like, because everybody else does. That's something that's different about my channel. Is I'm going to try to give you the accurate pronunciation. Sometimes I'll fail, but I'll try. And people, for some reason, don't like that. And again, here I think it's an instance of where language can be used as a weapon. It's like, no, you say it how an American should say it. You're in America, speak American. So I really hate that. But that's what annoys me, is when people get upset because I tried to pronounce it right.
Right. So I'm reflecting on what you're saying, and I'm like, okay, so in America, we have this value or the standard, like, try, but don't try too hard. If you get it correct, you're trying too hard.
Right.
But, like, at least try to make some effort, but just, like, kind of just stick with the status quo. Like, that's all we want you to do.
Yeah.
What is that? Why do we do that?
I don't know. And I don't even think it's just an American thing. I think it's a human thing. There is just this need for people they want to not stand out. Everything needs to be homogenous and comfortable. And I need you to also want to feel comfortable, and that's just, I think that's
what it is.
It's a thing that you find it everywhere. And I mean, I like to fit in. Everybody likes to fit in and everything, but I've never really fit in. So I'm very comfortable not fitting in. And so I would rather, do it my way. And it's my show, so I get to do it my way.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, I think you nailed the idea on the head. Comfortability. Like that's what it all surrounds. I think that excuse me. I think that many people feel uncomfortable when they see words in other languages. Maybe they're afraid they're going to butcher it or embarrass themselves.
Right.
What are some ways you think people could be more respectful of others' languages when they have no idea how to say a certain word?
Ask. I mean,
What?
that's the
That's
only
the
thing you can
simplest,
do.
yeah.
Is that's you can't be expected to go to an international phonetic alphabetic dictionary every time a word comes up. Most people don't know how to read it anyway, phonetic alphabet. But I you know so to go back what you were saying about people are afraid. There is a fear when a word comes up that they don't know because they're afraid to be wrong. We're all afraid to be wrong, and that's okay. And so, but I think that instead of being wrong, if I like, instead of trying and being wrong, it's just easier to purposefully be wrong, because then it's like, well, I didn't even try.
Yeah.
I can't be wrong because I didn't even try. I can't fail if I don't try. And so I think that that's a big thing with that kind of purposeful speaking it incorrectly thing. But yeah, no, I think just ask. And so there has to be patience on both sides, I think, because
Right.
even if you tell someone and they say it correctly, maybe tomorrow they'll go back to the way that they said it before because they don't remember. There's a lot of stuff in the world that we got to remember. So,
Yeah.
how to pronounce gyro correctly. Some people will say gyro, and they'll just say gyro forever and ever. But I do think that it is on the onus of the person who doesn't know the word to ask. Yeah.
And also listen.
And also listen when you let me tell you, and that is not just in language, that is in life. When you ask a question, listen to the answer.
Yes.
A lot of people, I used to work in restaurants serving tables, and I was guilty of it from time to time, but there are some servers who they'll ask a question and they will not listen to the answer. And then they'll leave the table and be like, what did she just say? What did she want? Because I wasn't paying attention because I was thinking about something else in my head. So yes, when you ask a question, then you have to listen, and you have to make an effort then to do it correctly. Even if you get it wrong, just make the effort.
I agree.
So, pronunciation, it matters. And I think the biggest takeaways today are it's okay to be wrong, make an effort,
Yeah.
and everyone's uncomfortable, but lean into that discomfort and try your best.
The only way you can learn stuff is to be uncomfortable. And I think that that's not just language. A lot of people are intellectually lazy. And I don't want that to sound as condescending as it just did.
No,
But
I
I
didn't feel
mean,
like it was condescending. I was like, you know what? I agree. But go ahead.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we have to think about throughout the day. And sometimes it's just easier to not think about something, to not do, critical thinking or learn something. Learning is exhausting. It's sitting there and reading, even if you're not moving, your brain is taxed. It is exhausting. And sometimes it's just easier to give up in a way. And, if you give up little bits over and over and over again, then you're just never going to learn and you're never going to improve. And I'm all about improving. If you've stopped improving, then it's time to die because you're no longer, because in a way you already have. It's like your brain has stopped growing. What's the point?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what Leah and our show podcasts are about. Like, how can you improve? Like, what can you do to improve, to be better, to remind yourself? Because life is hard, right? It's not easy. It's not an easy path.
Right.
Yeah. You know what, Lamont? I think it might be time for a little break, and then we'll come back and continue. Yes?
All right.
Yes?
Sounds
All
good.
right, cool. Let's take a break. Oh, I hit my microphone. So, Lamont, today's activity, we're going to be announcing our stickers.
Oh my gosh, we have stickers!
Yes, we will be dropping 4 exclusive, original Lamont and Leah stickers.
I'm so excited.
Yes, so we have 4 different designs. Let's talk about them. The first design is this cup one. Lamont, would you like to tell us about our cup design?
So, have you ever noticed that Leia and I have the same cup? In many episodes, we will drink water out of these cups. And so, Leia designed 2 cups, and it just says the Lamont and Leah podcast in between.
Yes.
And so, it's just a really fun sticker that you can have that represents our podcast and things that we talk about.
Nice. The next design we have pokes a little fun at Lamont. It is a happy face that says positive toxicity. Because on our toxic positivity episode, Lamont kept saying positive toxicity for some reason. And I still think it's the most hilarious thing.
I think it would be a great name of a band.
That would be a real, and the little happy face. Okay, if you want to start a band and you want to use this logo, I'll sell it to you. $2,000 plus royalties.
Oh my god.
Okay. Lamont, do you want to go over our next design?
Yeah, so our next sticker is a rainbow sticker. So there's a lot of pride in the Lamont and Leah podcast. And it's a rainbow, and it has 2 clouds, and on those clouds is a poppy flower and a hibiscus flower. The poppy flower represents California, and the hibiscus flower represents Hawaii. And you have the Lamont and Leah in there. So it's
And
just
also
really
a great message to love yourself.
Yeah. Oh,
Don't forget
yes.
that part.
Yes, I totally almost forgot that part. And like in the rainbow, it says "love yourself," and that's something that Leia and I are always like. If we don't say it directly in our podcast, every podcast is pretty much about loving yourself, or ways to love yourself, or ways to improve yourself. So I think it's a great representation of who we are as people.
Yes. And another way to improve yourself is this next sticker. Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah, when did you say that? What episode?
I probably said this in a few episodes already, because it really just comes back to making sure that you are aware of your feelings, of your thoughts, of the way you are presenting yourself, so you don't wreck yourself, bro.
It's important. That's important.
And this one, of course, features the iconic Lamont and Leah background. So you get to have
From
that.
the original Lamont and Leah show that we decided to like continue to use.
Because we love it and it's perfect.
Yeah.
So each of these stickers will be available on our shop on Instagram or Facebook. So make sure you go check those out, and they will be $2 each. But
there's more. There's more. So the first 5 people to leave comments in our comment section on YouTube will be given free stickers. 1 free sticker, and you can only
comment once.
Yeah, you can only comment once. I mean, you can comment more than once.
I mean, yeah.
Please, comment more than once, but
it's 1 entry.
1 person for yeah.
Exactly. And it's a surprise which sticker you're gonna get. I mean, you can tell us which sticker you like. Maybe we'll send it to you. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Maybe it would be that
Maybe. All right. Lamont, where are you going to put your stickers?
Well, I'm giving one to Dylan.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably have to send a few to our different guests.
Oh, we should. Oh, we
Hmm.
should. That would be a nice treat gift from us.
Yes. Mine's going to go in my water bottle because that's where I put all my stickers.
Okay, so I know that I'm going to be getting a new commander deck in for Magic: The Gathering when they drop the Vampire series. I think in October. If it's not October, it's November. I think it's October. So I have to buy a new box. And like Dylan has been like putting stickers all on his box. And so like I totally want to decorate like my box with my stickers.
Awesome. So, yes, go ahead. Leave us a comment so that you can get a sticker. Remember, the first 5 people. If you're not one of the first 5 people, don't worry. They will be for sale on our shop. And let us know down in the comments anyway which one you like the most. Thank you.
We're getting ready to wrap up here. I just have one last like question, one fun question that we can talk about. What is one word that you just hate to hear people mispronounce?
And I don't know why this is the word, because it really shouldn't be this big a deal. But bruschetta, when people say bruschetta, everybody says bruschetta.
Yeah, I do.
But yeah, no, because that's how it would be pronounced in English, or in German or anything that sch. But in Italian, it's bruschetta. So that's always one that kind of bugs me. I don't know why, but it does. What's funny though, there is another word that I hate hearing mispronounced because I mispronounce it, and I hate it because I always have to correct myself, and I'm never going to get it right. Is the word caramel? I say caramel.
Me too.
Because
Yeah, same.
there are places. Yeah, so there are different regional dialects and everything, and that's just how we say caramel, but it should be caramel. And so I say it wrong, and every time I'm like, why can't I ever say that word right?
Because you hear it wrong all the time.
Yeah.
There are a lot of words like that,
Lamont, what word irks you?
Tortilla.
Tortilla?
Yeah, like I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
like, I just want to stab the person. I'm like, they better be glad my Thea's not here, because I'm pretty sure she would slap them. Like, that is not okay. It's a tortilla. Say it with me, tortilla.
That's so funny.
For me, besides like Hawaii, it's also Kapiolani. People say Kapiolani, which is a name / street name over here.
Right.
Just everyone says Kapiolani, and I'm like, Kapiolani. Kapiolani.
That's really.
Kapiolani.
See, I need to take some like basic rudimentary Hawaiian pronunciation, because I think I think it is one of the most beautiful languages that there is. There's just something about it. It's like there are just so many vowels involved in the language, and it's just so liquid and everything. And I'm obsessed with Hawaiian history, and yet here I am not knowing much about the actual language. So
we'll have to go over it.
Yes, well, I'll be there in a couple months, so
Right.
I need to learn before I come.
All right,
I want to do some history of Hawaiian food. So
Right?
Ooh, sounds good. Sounds good. Leia, I just realized I do say Hawaii because your mom early on, she's like, that's not how you say it.
Yeah.
And so I corrected myself, but I still say Hawaiian people. Is that proper or?
Yeah, Hawaiian people
Okay.
is the English word for it. Like Hawaiian is English, if that
Right.
makes any sense.
yeah, because
Yeah.
the IAN to distinguish
Yeah.
that,
So that-
to
yeah.
make it into an
That would be
adjective.
the English word. But if you wanted to say Hawaiian people in Hawaiian, it would be Kanaka Maoli.
Oh, well, that's not even a. that's
Yeah.
There's also, there is a, and it doesn't really apply to that, but there is also the notion that language changes, and the only real purpose of language is to convey a message.
Right.
And so sometimes pronunciation or meanings of words can end up being a hindrance to that. Say and this isn't really pronunciation, but the word to decimate. If I said, the place was decimated, you would know what I meant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, originally it meant 1/10 of the people in a legion were killed. That's not what we would use it for today.
Yeah. Okay.
But there are some people who said, well, that's not what it means. It actually means, and it's like, well, yeah, but December means the 10th month, but I still celebrate it at the 12th month. So language evolves, language changes. And so that is, even when it comes to some pronunciation, it's like, well, the pronunciation has changed for a certain word. Usually it's in your own language, of course. But, people who are too sticklers on, well, that's not how it was pronounced 200 years ago. Well, no, but that is how it's pronounced today.
Yeah. I was not alive 200 years ago. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I guess that's when you turn on your therapist's mind. Mine can't be like, why is this important to you?
Why is this exactly? Why is this
How does
important?
this make
Because
you feel?
the need to be right, the need to correct people,
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And I think that's why some people are like mean about it, is they have this need to correct, but then like, do we have to correct rudely?
Well, that's the thing. I don't mind being corrected at all if you do it nicely. But a lot of people, they don't.
No.
Don't do it nicely.
That was a great question, Lamont. Thank you for asking that.
Oh, no problem. Well, Max, we are so thankful that you came on to talk with Leah and myself.
It was my
today.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. If people wanted to get in contact with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, you can always find me on YouTube, but if you want to contact me, then usually Instagram is the best way. Tasting History with Max Miller. I get to most of the when people message me on there. It takes me some time, it might take a few weeks, but I definitely respond to everything.
And of course, all of his links and whatnot will be in our show description, so you can check them out. So besides your YouTube, do you have any special projects that you're working on that you can and want to share with us?
Yeah, well, I just started Drinking History. It's on the same channel as Tasting History, but it's specifically toward drinks, not just alcohol. I just did lemonade, but a lot of it will be alcoholic drinks. There's a lot of great history with liquor and beer and wine. And I am working on a cookbook. It's a ways away from publication. Publishing things takes forever. But that will be out eventually.
Looking forward to that.
All right. And then finally, would you be able to leave us with a message? It doesn't have to be about today's topic. It can be something that you just really want people to know or experience from you. That would be really cool.
Gosh, I think just keep learning. That's what Tasting History is all about. It's teaching, teaching about food, teaching how to cook. And I'm not a professional cook, so it's kind of like I'm learning and then you're learning from me. So I'm only one step ahead of you sometimes, but that's just, and not just with Tasting History, but just in general, I think it's so important that we just keep learning. It'll make the world better. It makes people kinder to each other. And that's what it's all about.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you to our viewers and listeners, and we'll see you next week.
Today's life lesson is always take the opportunity to learn. Learning means to learn to ask questions. Always ask people before you allow assumptions to become false truths. When we take the time to ask and be curious about what is going on, we are taking the opportunities to learn. Turn this way of being into a lifelong belief and prosper. And that is today's life lesson.